Before the Hotel Saskatchewan ever welcomed royalty and rock stars, it was built from the bones of a failed dream, the steel skeleton of a ghost hotel that never lived. Maybe that's why so many spirits still linger in its halls, watching quietly from the shadows of luxury. In this final radio episode, we'll uncover the haunted legacy of one of Regina's most iconic buildings, from its ghostly origins to the apparitions that still walk its corridors. Stay with me to hear the whispers behind the walls. Good evening and welcome back to Paraghoul Paranormal Discoveries from the Dark. I'm your host, K.D. Culpa, a horror author and paranormal researcher based in Regina, Saskatchewan. Each week on the podcast, we dive into the shadows of Saskatchewan's past and even go beyond, uncovering dark history, mysteries, urban legends, and sometimes we even get to some monsters. If you're one of the listeners that comes back each week but aren't yet subscribed, please hit that follow button and share it with someone who loves the weird and wonderful. I've got more big guests and haunted deep dives coming your way, so join me now as we explore the unknown and bring life to the ghosts and monsters hiding in the dark. Tonight's episode is a special one. This marks my final show here on 91.3 FM CJTR, Access Now Community Radio. It's been an amazing journey sharing these eerie tales with you every week, and I can't wait to tell you what's next for Paraghoul Paranormal. And we are ending our final show on the air with our new series that we just started this season, the Haunted Saskatchewan Listener Collection. I'm very excited to be sharing some of the stories we actually shared on our YQR Haunts tour this October, which I am still in awe over how well they went and the responses that we've received from those of you that joined us. If you came along, a massive thank you from me and Kathy as you made our first year of YQR Haunts extremely special. Now tonight, I'd love to share with you the history and the hauntings of the Hotel Saskatchewan here in Regina. One of the things I love about Regina's history is that the same key players just seem to get repeated so many times across a lot of the key buildings and key inflection points in our history. In this case, Hotel Saskatchewan is no different. After the Canadian Pacific Railway built the tracks connecting the east to the west in the 1880s, something you already know if you've been listening for a while, they started focusing on building grand hotels along those tracks to attract visitors and tourists at some of their stops. And Regina was no different. In 1926, construction was started for the Hotel Saskatchewan by the Canadian Pacific Railway. However, there is a bit of a darker start to this hotel that isn't always talked about. And that's because someone else tried to beat CPR to the punch. Back in 1911, the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway actually started planning their own version of a luxury hotel here in Regina. It was going to be part of a chain of luxury hotels across Canada, just like Canadian Pacific Railway was trying to do, and it was going to be called the Chateau Coppell. Now, this hotel was intended to be 10 stories high and in the Scottish baronial style. And it was actually located on Albert Street and College Avenue, right on the corner there, which is now where you might know the Regina Museum sits. It was designed by Ross and McDonald, the same firm that would later be used by the Canadian Pacific Railway to build the Hotel Saskatchewan. Now, construction didn't actually start on this Coppell Hotel until 1913, when they were able to start putting in pilings and steel girders. However, in 1914, when World War I started, construction had to be stopped due to, of course, labor shortages and then, of course, the material rationing. So this caused the steel skeleton to remain unfinished, standing like a ghost near Wascana Park. Then, in 1919, the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway would end up going bankrupt, meaning that the Chateau Capel would be officially abandoned and the skeleton would be left behind until 1922. So, around this time is when the Canadian Pacific Railway was starting to look at building its Grand Hotel in Regina. So, it ended up purchasing some of the unused steel from the Chateau Capel and, yeah, to start building its own hotel. Now, of course, it also chose a new location, which, as you now know, is on Victoria Avenue, to make sure that it wasn't going to be associated with the failed project. So they didn't want to try and they wanted to reuse materials, but not reuse the same area in Wascana Park. Now, by 1927, the Hotel Saskatchewan was completed, and that was just 11 months after it started construction, which is actually quite amazing if you think about it. Only 11 months, especially back in the 1920s. That's quite impressive. And as I said, the new building was also designed by Ross and McDonald, but this time in a modern classical style with Georgian overtones. It was built by the Regina firm Smith Brothers and Wilson and required an H-shaped plan. And of course, it had that awesome Tyndall stone that is just in all of the nice buildings here in Regina. And well, really quite across Saskatchewan, there's quite a few that have that nice Tyndall stone. And it was quickly opened to the public with a banquet and tours of the hotel. Now, of course, at first, because this was such a royal, expensive looking hotel, it did operate as a luxury hotel in its early years, hosting dignitaries, celebrities, and even royal family. However, when the Great Depression hit in 1945, and that's also when the Lieutenant Governor of Saskatchewan ended up having to move its official residence from the government house, which was handed over to the Veterans Affairs Department to be used as a convalescent home at that time, to Hotel Saskatchewan. And the Lieutenant Governor would continue using the hotel as their official residence until 1984, when the government house would return to being used partially as an official residence and partially as the museum that we now know and love. If you came on the tour, you would have gotten that love again because we loved it there. Now, in 1993, the Hotel Saskatchewan was designated as a municipal heritage property and in the 1990s underwent extensive renovations to improve and modernize the interior original sketches. And photos were, of course, archived for the province. So if you are ever interested in seeing some of the rooms the way they looked before renovations, and then I think they went under renovations again in 2015, I want to say. So there's been a few different acquisitions since the 1990s, and there's also been a couple different major renovations to kind of modernize them. So it looks quite different now than what it did originally, but you can always go to the archives if you want to check out the original rooms. Now, what's interesting about the Hotel Saskatchewan is that has not only hosted royalty and celebrities and the like, but it has also been known to have a few guests that have never checked out. And that's what we'll get into now. Now, as we get into the hauntings that are said to be experienced at the hotel, I do want to mention that I tried to do a deep dive into archived newspapers to find any proof of the backstories to these ghosts. However, I was unable to find anything about the suicides or deaths that happened in the hotel. I was able to find some deaths that were said to be in a local hotel, in quotation marks there, without any indication of which Regina Hotel was being referred to, but they were all of natural causes that I could find, at least. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that these did not happen. It's just I wasn't able to find them in the newspapers that I looked through. It will probably take a lot more digging to see if I can find any proof or talking to Hotel Sask if they're willing to share that information. Now, one of the more commonly known ghost stories in the hotel is actually in a specific room. Now, I can't share which room I am going to be talking about, but I'm told that the staff purposely avoid putting single men into it. When they do, apparently it is common that the TV will turn on and off by itself, or even the lights. And in some cases, single men will also feel someone crawling into bed as they sleep. I found one account where a man fled the hotel at 3 a.m. after waking to see a woman hovering over the bed where he was sleeping. However, when couples or women are placed into the room, nothing really happens, or at least not as significant. Who is the apparition that haunts this specific room? The ghost is known as the grieving woman. Now, she's believed to be a woman who took her life after her soldier fiance failed to come home from the war. Rumor claims that he might have met someone else on the train on his way home and just never got off to meet his fiance. Although I'm not sure how true that latter bit is, as I wasn't able to find any confirmed name or any record of her death, but the story has circulated among the hotel staff for years. Now, the second most commonly seen apparition, one which I wonder if even my brother has seen, is known as the man in the hat. So, this one doesn't stick to a specific room, but apparently does hang out on a particular floor. Now, again, I can't say which floor for sure it is, as the hotel prefers to keep these things under wraps, but he tends to be wearing a bowler hat with an old-fashioned suit. He's seen walking down the hallway only to disappear through a wall at the end, so one that goes outside. The story behind this ghost is that he was a man from the 1920s or 1930s who had suffered financial ruin. Now, while in the hotel, he did end up taking his own life by jumping off the balcony. The claim is that the balcony was removed and a wall added in its place to prevent future suicides in that manner, which is why you simply see him walk through the wall. Now, on the top floor of the hotel is the Royal Suite. Now, this is a room I would love to see myself. So, the Royal Suite is one of the most luxurious rooms in the hotel because it was designed to host VIP guests, including royalty. So, think the Queen. The suite is a lot larger than all other rooms, including a large dining room, sitting area, butler's pantry, and bedroom. Now, I was even told while I was on the YQR Haunts tour by someone that had actually did a tour. You can actually do a tour of the Royal Suite, I've been told. And they saw that there are actual gold statues of the Queen's dogs even kind of in the area, which is kind of interesting. Now, anyway, the story goes that this particular room has a bit of a prankster ghost that likes to bug the staff. When cleaning the room, staff has said that objects will move or disappear, only to be found later in places that you wouldn't expect. Think of things like a teacup found in the garbage, or cutlery hidden in the butler's pantry. One claim is that one of the cupboards in one of the rooms opened by itself, followed by a vase flying across the room. Although these latter two don't seem to be as common, the Royal Suite is known as the least favorite room to clean because of the unsettling atmosphere. Now, some claim that a violent murder happened in the room, but again, I wasn't able to find any records to confirm that, so it's hard to say for sure what actually happened to bring a trickster ghost in the space. Now, a ghost that is sometimes seen by guests is that of the bellhop. So the bellhop is said to be a man wearing an old-style uniform that hasn't been worn in at least 40 years. The claim goes that he doesn't respond when greeted, and he will vanish when people turn around. In this case, nobody knows who the bellhop could be, but Maybe it's just a residual haunting from a long-time employee. Again, I couldn't find any deaths or incidents that might be tied to a bellhop happening in the hotel itself, but those that have seen him claimed that the uniform suggests that he could be from the mid 20th century. So I don't know. Maybe it's just someone that really loved working at the hotel and just is continuing to hang out. Or maybe it's one of those echo kind of hauntings that it's not really a ghost, but but that's still echoing there. Now, one of the more tragic and sad ghost stories, or ghosts that are said to haunt the Hotel Saskatchewan, is that of the ballroom dancer. So, the ballroom dancer is said to be a woman who died of a heart attack on New Year's Eve while dancing with her husband. They say now her spirit continues to dance and move about the ballroom. Motion sensors are often triggered in the ballroom when it's empty and closed, and sometimes staff have even heard music coming from within. On one occasion, the curtains even floated and were held in the air for a full minute as staff fled the room. In this case, the claim is that the woman died in the 1990s during a New Year's Eve event in the hotel. Again, I haven't been able to find the public record for her name or the incident, but it has been confirmed by multiple staff accounts. Now, apparently, staff know of the energies that do exist in the building. I was told by one of the previous staff that while working there, you would often feel the presence or a heavy presence in the hallways. A staff member could feel like they were being pushed from behind while walking on their midnight rounds, or perhaps they would just feel a heavy presence following them. This is particularly when they are doing the midnight rounds, so that's when they are out looking for trays left out in the hallways by guests that need to be cleaned up before morning. Now, with a staff member that I talked to specifically, there was one case where she was doing the midnight rounds and had put all of the trays into a shelving unit in the staff room behind the service elevator. Now, apparently, she had felt the presence all night that night and even felt a slight push in the hallway, so nothing unusual. Same thing that happens apparently on a regular basis. Now, as she was turning away from the trays lined up on their shelving, suddenly all of the trays flew out off of the shelves and crashed onto the floor behind her. Needless to say, she left the staff area and quickly went downstairs to find someone else. However, she did also let us know that it seemed that as long as the staff acknowledged the spirits of the hotel, then they wouldn't be bothered, indicating that perhaps the spirits just want to be known about, or at the very least, they do not want to be ignored, or they will cause something to happen. Now, in this last story that I have to share with you, it's a little bit more personal. So this one actually happened to my brother in the basement of Hotel Saskatchewan. Right now it's a weight room, but previously it was a men's pub where men could go smoke and drink. My brother was lifting weights when he saw a man in there wearing a brown old-fashioned suit and really nice old-fashioned leather shoes. He saw the man walk by one pillar, go kind of across the side of the room, and then behind another pillar. Now, the area that he would have entered is rather small and apparently doesn't have a door or window. So my brother got up to go get a glass of water and kind of check out what this man was doing because, he was really interested to figure it out because this man was so dressed up in this old kind of old-fashioned clothing, but it looked like really expensive, but he was in the gym. So he thought it was kind of strange that this man was here. Except when he rounded the pillar where the man was last seen in the area, so the area without doors or windows, it was empty. The man wasn't there. Now, the one thing I'm really interested about the story is whether or not he was wearing a bowler hat. I really should check in with my brother to find that out. As in, it could just be the man in the hat from upstairs. Maybe coming downstairs to check things out or to look to see, if there's someone around. Now, I don't have a confirmed death in the basement either, but I'm told that the area does have a strong energy to it. Now, currently, there are other paranormal activities reported in the hotel that you kind of find in various places. This includes footsteps, heavy breathing behind you, shadow figures, or even orbs in photos. Sometimes an elevator will start moving with no one inside or no one calling it, or cupboards and glasses will start moving on their own. Of course, as we mentioned, certain floors and certain rooms seem to have more energy and more activity, but the hotel staff feels that it can be spread across even more rooms and floors. So it's not necessarily they're stuck in those rooms or in that specific floor. Of course, multiple sources claim that these are probably from suicides that occurred in the building, but I haven't been able to find the public records confirming names or dates, so I can't say that that's for sure. However, I don't know if you've been following any sort of paranormal thing for any specific amount of time. Like it's interesting that hotels always seem to be associated with this kind of suicidal events and emotional trauma, or just people checking in that have no planned future in mind. And so they plan to end their lives while there. So it just seems to be hotels have that kind of energy or story tied to them no matter where you go. But I don't know. I always find hotels really interesting, especially when you kind of look at the paranormal aspect of it. Like I said, it's not an uncommon thing for suicides to happen in hotels, like especially if you look into any of the haunted hotels in the US. They're commonly referred to as being caused by suicides and tragic deaths. So I don't know if it's just that they're away from their homes and that's where they choose to do it, away from their significant others. So it is, maybe it's possible that Hotel Saskatchewan has had its own fair share of these, considering it's been open for nearly 100 years. So I don't know, but maybe they just haven't shared the details with the newspaper. Although I don't know, I was reading some of the newspapers from the 1920s and 1930s for this episode, and they share quite a bit back then about, who died, when they died, how they died, what were they wearing. Like it's quite interesting, actually, how much they put into those. I don't know. I was quite surprised. And another thing to consider with the Hotel Saskatchewan specifically is that it was near where the 1912 tornado swept through Regina, killing 28 people and injuring hundreds. Of course, the Hotel Saskatchewan wasn't there yet since it was born or it was constructed in 1927. I guess that's sort of born, isn't it? I don't know. Anyway, it wasn't constructed till 1927, but the area around it did have to go through that devastation of the F4 tornado sweeping through and killing all those people. So I often wonder if that energy from the tornado, as well as the just emotional trauma and energy from, 28 people dying in 10 minutes, what that might cause kind of in that pathway of the tornado. I feel like it could have left some extra energy that maybe is causing these hauntings along its path to be a little bit more prevalent than in other areas of Regina. I don't know. I just find it interesting that so many of the haunted, really haunted buildings seem to be on or right beside the path of that tornado. So I find that very interesting. I would also love to know if anyone has seen Frank Dark. So if you've ever listened to the episodes before, one of my favorite ghosts in Regina is of Francis Dark. And so Frank actually had his house originally on the land where Hotel Saskatchewan was built. So he actually sold his land to Canadian Pacific Railway so that they could build this hotel before he would eventually build the house that is now known as the Stonehall Castle, using that lovely Tyndall stone that we talk about so much because of the tornado. So I'm just curious if Frank maybe shows up once in a while. But yeah, there was just lots to think about while researching this episode, and I feel like I could have just kept researching for another week. I was really excited to share some of these stories while on the YQR Haunts Tour this October, and I only thought it would be fitting as the final episode of Paraghoul Paranormal at CJTR. Well, final for now, anyway. I'm sad to be calling this my last show, but maybe I'll be back again in the future someday when time allows it. However, if you do have Saskatchewan ghost stories that you'd like to share, or even Western Canadian ghost stories, because I think I'm going to have to start looking at Western Canada here soon. I will be sharing these episodes, continuing to share these episodes on Paraghoul Paranormal, the podcast. They just will not be coming out on the weekly cadence anymore, as I need to take some time to finish writing my current horror book and spend some more time on planning the expansion of the YQR Haunts tour for 2026. Thank you for listening to Paraghoul Paranormal. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, then make sure you check out my local YQR Ghost Guide to learn more about the top ghosts and haunted buildings in Regina. Within the free download, you'll learn about who the most famous ghosts of Regina, Saskatchewan are, as well as some of the history behind the most haunted buildings. So head over to my website at kdkulpa.com to get your copy today. And before you go, I just want to say thank you for being here. Every listen, every share, every bit of support helps me take this podcast further. It allows me to interview bigger names in the horror and paranormal world, travel to more haunted places, and create more behind-the-scenes content just for you. So if you haven't already, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. I'll keep doing my part to make this show something special and spooky just for you. So stay tuned for more episodes where we uncover more secrets, unravel more mysteries, and dive deeper into the shadows. This is Katie Culpa signing off. Until next time, my ghouls.